And it's very, very difficult in just a few minutes to summarize 38 years of a single officer's career. So I promise only to take 40 years to do that. You know, I was observing some of the models that you see in front of you, and I said, Jay, why is it you put your guitar up there? And he looked at me, he said, Chairman, that would be a satellite. And I said, how come the Navy made it into this thing with a submarine? And he said, Chairman, that would be the X-37. So clearly, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as a lifelong infantryman, has a lot to learn about space. And I can tell you, we are incredibly lucky as a country to have Jay Raymond to have been our first Chief of Space Operations. And he has paved the way. He is very much a pioneer. And I want to thank all of the guests that are here today. We have former secretaries, we have former senators and congressmen, we have current senators and congressmen, we have our Secretary of Defense, we have our Secretary of the Air Force. We have so many dignitaries here that it's impossible to list you all. And I want to thank you all, though, for coming. But only 3 of you in this entire crowd have actually traveled to space. And I would like former Senator Nelson and the other 2 astronauts to please stand to be recognized. And I would also like to recognize Elon Musk, who's here, who needs no introduction, certainly by me. But what he symbolizes in reality is the combination of the civil and military cooperation and teamwork that makes the United States the most powerful country in space. So Elon, thank you for making yourself present here today. You know, Jay Raymond is a man with a distinguished record of competence, courage, and character. And if you know Jay, you know that he bleeds orange, and that is the orange of Clemson. He is a Clemson graduate. Even though his entire family graduated from the United States Military Academy going back to 1865, Jay Raymond upped his game and decided he would go to Clemson. He's also a deep lover of football. And everywhere he goes, he talks about how great Clemson football is. In fact, it's so great, he calls it the Harvard of the South. So Jay, I don't know if you know about Harvard's football team, but you might want to check with your son, who went to Yale. And if it's really the Harvard of the South, if what he means is that Clemson is truly the #1 school, then he should have probably called it the Princeton of the South, Jay. I couldn't let that go. Sorry. Hey, look, in all seriousness, Jay is pretty famous, and not only in the military, but in the country. Of course, he was hand-selected to pick or to be the head of a brand new service. And I think he was also hand-selected because of his choice of uniform. He is wearing the same uniform that Steve Carroll may have worn last night at your dinner at the Netflix show of Space Force. But look it, Jay Raymond wasn't only born with a brush of stardom. A few years ago, he was in Japan, and it was a very humbling experience for Jay. He was traveling at an airport, and he noticed that a lot of Japanese were looking at him, and they were pointing at him. And when he got to the gate, he heard people mention that Bruce Willis was there. So Jay grew up loving space, so of course, he was very excited to meet Bruce Willis. He always admired the movie Armageddon, and he wanted to meet the man who saved the United States from the asteroid. So Jay kept looking around for Bruce, and all the Japanese kept looking at Jay. Now, Jay is pretty sharp. Jay is the kind of guy you want leading Space Force. He's pretty quick on the uptake, right? He's really sharp. And he finally realized that it was he who was Bruce Willis. So thank you. Thank you, Jay, for being so sharp. That's perhaps why you went to Clemson instead of West Point. So you know, Jay commissioned in 1984 out of ROTC. And in that year, 9,190 officers commissioned. And because of the high-tech world we live in today, I was able to figure that out by going on Siri. And in a matter of seconds, Siri gave me that answer, 9,190. I asked the J1 of the Joint Force. It took 3 weeks to get that answer. So Siri, 9,190. And we now know also from Siri, so this is totally reliable, we also know from Siri that 38 officers in that class of 1984 have made general officer, and only 2 have made the rank of 4-star general officer, and Jay was the first. I did the math, and of course I was an advanced math major, and of this group, by my math, that comes out to 0.0002. Elon can check that, 0.0002. And that is a likelihood, according to my West Point classmates, of 1 1/50th of 1% chance. Now, I have no idea what those stats mean, but it means it's really small. It's a tiny chance to make the rank of 4-star, and it's even tinier to make the rank of 4-star in a service that doesn't even exist at the time. So, it's pretty impressive. In fact, by my math, again, this is Princeton math, Jay. By my math, Clemson has a greater chance of winning the NFL championship than you do of becoming a 4-star in a Space Force that didn't exist before you came. You know, since President Kennedy made his famous 1962 speech, we chose to go to the moon speech. Over 600 people have gone to space, but there's only been one chief of space operations to date, and that's been Jay Raymond. And now Salty is number 2. So to both of them, to the pioneer and his follower, and both of you are pioneers, I want to give you both a rounding applause. We are here in this hangar at Andrews, literally witnessing history. It might as well be 1947 as it is today. That is what you are witnessing. You are witnessing the divorce of the Air Force from the Army, and now you're witnessing the divorce of the Space Force from the Air Force. So you've witnessed 2 divorces in a matter of only 80 years. So that's pretty good. And this divorce, though, is not total, because this divorce still belongs to the Department of the Air Force. So I will give you credit as a graduate of West Point to keep them together. Very well done, Secretary. You know, in all seriousness, Jay started out his career as a missileer, and he was a Minuteman crewman on an ICBM up in North Dakota, and he was in the midst of the Cold War in those days, and his task and purpose was to prevent great power nuclear war between us and then the Soviet Union. That task, and the tens of thousands who have gone before him, and that task of the tens of thousands that are still out there today, as we sit here in this hangar, in those missile fields, that remains the single most important task that they have, and that's been like that since really the 1940s. And I will tell you that the role of Space Force is no less important. The role of Space Force now, under Salty's leadership and under Jay's pioneering leadership, is to do exactly that. It's to make sure that we are the dominant power. We are the power that has the most capable Space Force in order to do a single thing, and that is to prevent great power war. The one thing this world doesn't need is a great power war. And Salty, it's up to you, it's up to all of us in the Joint Force. Jay has passed the colors to you, and that is your critical task. Jay transitioned to the space world as a Space Operations Center controller, where he also then worked on ICBMs and ICBM tests. And shortly after 11 September, that fateful day in history, Jay helped deploy space control systems to get the much-needed capabilities that we needed on the ground, that we as infantry and special forces and Marines needed on the ground, because we fight as a joint force. You see, armies and navies and Marines and air forces don't go to war, and neither do space forces. Nations go to war, and we go to war as a joint force, and Space Force is critical to that. And Jay Raymond literally wrote the plans, literally wrote the doctrine, and literally developed the capabilities that we see deployed today, and Salty's going to carry that on. As a general officer, Jay was then the vice commander of the 5th Air Force in Japan during the 2011 tsunami and the Fukushima nuclear disaster, which we also know so well, which was the most severe nuclear accident since the 1986 Chernobyl catastrophe. And Jay handled that with incredible skill, compassion, and empathy. He also coordinated the response and helped bring tremendous U.S. military support to the people of Japan. And I will tell you, Jay, you're not only famous for walking through airports, you are also famous in Japan for the help for the millions of lives that you in fact saved, millions of Japanese lives you in fact saved. So you are a hero there in many, many ways. He then went on to lead Space Force Command, and then Space Command, and now U.S. Space Force, which he just gave up. He's commanded at every level, from flight all the way up to service chief. He's impressed his bosses, he's impressed his peers, but most of all, he's impressed his subordinates. He was personally selected to lead the Space Force because of that 360 evaluation, because he was so respected by so many people in all directions. He was the right guy to push us into space. He was the right guy to give birth to the Space Force. He understands not only the operational role of the warfighter, but he also understands the American role in space. I will tell you that Jay's courage, his commitment, his compassion is incredible. But I will also tell you that not only is his grit and courage and compassion and commitment, it's his integrity that matters. As a military leader, Jay knows what I'm talking about. He knows that as a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that it was he and his spine, and it was the spines of each member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that mattered when it mattered. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. He always took care of his people. He always maintained his oath to the Constitution. He was always competent, and he was always committed to this great nation. And how does all that happen? It doesn't happen by accident. It happens because he was born into a great family. The qualities and skills that Jay Raymond has demonstrated throughout his life, his love of country, his direction, his passion, came first, of course, from his parents. He was molded then by his brothers and sisters and peers and mentors, and shaped by his military training and his experience and his coaches. He comes from a long lineage of military service, as I said, dating back to 1865, when his great-great-great-grandfather, Charles Raymond, graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. And everyone went to West Point since then. In fact, when his great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, graduated from West Point in 1865. The Raymond family since then has an unbroken record of 157 consecutive years of military service in uniform. If you consider the wars, if you consider the sacrifice of not only the individuals but his family, it's an enormous contribution to our country. He also comes from a culture of space exploration. It was Jay's great-great-grandfather, Brigadier General Charles Raymond, who commanded the expedition to Tasmania to measure how long it took Venus to transit the sun. Now, I'm not sure why you'd go to Tasmania to figure out how long it takes to figure out Venus to the sun, but he did it, and he passed along those genes to you. So well done. I don't write this, I just read it sometimes. So here, I guess here's the kicker. They used the measurement from Venus to transit to the sun to calculate the distance between the Earth and the sun. I thought we already knew that by that time, but I guess not. I guess it was a Raymond who figured that out. And then what does the guy do? What does Brigadier General Charles Raymond do? He goes and teaches astronomy at West Point. That's perfect. So that's the legacy of the Raymond family in space. Can't make this up. But in all seriousness, it's a tremendous legacy of family to service, because in between there's a lot of infantrymen, artillerymen, and armor officers that fought in ground combat and understand the crucible of the blood and the pain that went along with 157 years of service. But not only does he get it from his ancestral family, he gets it from his immediate family, from Jay's wife. He met Molly back in the day at their first duty station in North Dakota. And Molly was the only woman in all of North Dakota at the time. Molly told me that. I didn't. That wasn't written here. She told me that. And then they got married in 1987. And then they moved together to Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. And Jay, of course, at that point was familiar with military lifestyle and challenges, but it was a new experience for Molly. They moved to California. It was tough. It was hard on them, and she dearly missed her family back home. There were challenges, as there always is, for any military family, and there was challenges no less for Molly as a new spouse. Molly cares deeply about assisting military families, about helping them through the challenge of service, the challenges of being a young spouse in the military. She helped so many families over the years in all of the commands that we can't really name all of them here today. But she never passes up an opportunity to help. Molly is one of those people who always reaches her hand out. She's always helpful to no matter who she sees. She's always the one who is taking care of the other. Molly is so selfless, it's incredible, that they have been married now for almost 35 years, and she has been a total selfless servant to our nation without a single dime of pay. So Molly, thank you so much for what you do. And Jay and Molly have raised an amazing family. They've got two wonderful daughters and a son. Christina is currently also working to help others, working to help troops, and she works for the Wounded Warrior Project. Amy is also helping in another incredible career as a teacher. And teachers are so underrated in our country and underpaid that it's incredible, but she's a dedicated third-grade teacher. So to both Christina and Amy, who's helping in the Wounded Warrior Project and as a teacher, thanks to both of you for what you do. And Gary plays football at that other great, renowned, world-class football school called Yale. So Gary, if I could have you stand up, just so people could take a look at how big you are. There. So Gary, I want you to know that your dad built that guitar just for you. So look at families, our spouses, and our children serve and sacrifice in so many ways, way more than we do. To our families and to our spouses and our children and our grandchildren, they think every minute of every day is like the first 20 minutes of Private Ryan. And I can tell you that we in uniform know what we're doing on a given day, but our families don't. And for them, it's a bit of a mystery. And for them, their service and their sacrifice matter way more than ours do. So to represent all the families of all of our serving soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and of course, Space Guardians, I want to say thank you to the Raymond family. Jay, you have made a lasting impact, you and your family, going all the way back to 1865. You and your family have made a lasting impact on this country. As I've noted, you're a man of integrity. You're a man of competence, commitment, character. You're a man of patriotism. You're a devoted father and husband and a dedicated leader. You've sacrificed much for the ideals of this nation. And most importantly, Jay, you have maintained your oath to the idea that is America, the idea that is contained in our Constitution, the idea that is very simple and yet powerful, the idea that simply says that no matter who you are, and it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you're male or you're female, something in between, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're black or you're white, it doesn't matter if you're Asian or Indian, it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or Protestant, Muslim or Jew, doesn't matter what your last name is, doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is you're an American. And we are all Americans. And every single one of us is born free and equal. And Jay Raymond, you have maintained that oath to that document, that idea that is America, and there is no greater thanks that we as a nation can give you today than to make sure that we carry on that oath just like you did. So thank you so much.